Max, welcome back to your home.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Maybe we'll start with that. As a Chicago entrepreneur, I often am in conversations about Chicago versus other parts of the country, which is not, to me, an appropriate conversation, but it's people are drawn to try to figure out how geography matters. So number one, why did you leave? Why didn't you stay here to pursue your technology dreams? We'll start with that. Why did you leave?
So, in college, I started and failed with a couple of companies, and there's a variety of reasons for those failures, and they're almost like a rite of passage. If you don't fail a couple of times, you don't really know what success really should taste like. But many of the reasons were internal. I didn't know what I was doing. I was naive. Didn't really know enough people sort of in the business. Didn't know enough about business. But one key thing that was missing in Chicago at the time, and I know this because I went up to Chicago from Champaign, where I went to school to raise money, was any kind of an ecosystem. The only thing that I was able to find that was dedicated to supporting entrepreneurs in the organization was the MIT Enterprise Forum, which has been around and doing this for a very long time, and their service is definitely important. But there was no venture ecosystem whatsoever. A law firm that I tried to hire to help me understand the legalities of starting a company in Chicago offered me a bill that made my eyes pop, and I said, well, I read somewhere that in the Valley they take options, and the lawyer was like, yeah, whatever, kid. So the lack of ecosystem or support or understanding of what entrepreneurship is, and the idea of high risk, high reward in the tech sense of that, or in the tech segment, was completely absent.
Your family still is from here.
Yeah.
And with the knowledge that you have about what's happening here, where do you think Chicago is today? And at the same time, what do you think makes the Valley so special?
The differences are actually very, very small at this point. So high-speed internet, fortunately, is everywhere. Understanding and certainly the clarity comes very quickly once you see companies go public on NASDAQ, and sort of like, wow, that's a lot of value being created in 3, 4, 5 years' time. So every city that has tech talent and entrepreneurial roots, which Chicago has plenty of, just starts encouraging its citizens to go start companies in every segment that appears to be growing. So Chicago and Silicon Valley aren't all that different. The real difference at this point is probably just the level of friction. Silicon Valley is still the most, for lack of a better term, lubricated place to start a company. The second you walk out of your bedroom and say, today I'm going to go do a startup, you have lawyers, venture capitalists, everyone who doesn't necessarily want to help you because there's plenty of people who are doing the same thing, but they all understand exactly what you're talking about. So the time to explain what it is you're trying to do, the shorthand is universally understood. I think Chicago probably isn't quite there, but it's infinitely better than when it was 15 years ago when I left.
Absolutely. One quick sort of background question. Your parents came here from Russia, and your mother, both in Russia and to this day, is a computer programmer.
That's right.
Which is remarkable. I don't want to ask her age, but let's assume she's she's been around for a while.
Let's just say I'm pushing 40, and she didn't have me in her teenage years. So,
so real quick, how that obviously was part of why you started programming, right? How important is it, do you think, that parents teach their kids programming or show them by example or what?
I think it's critical. I think the two greatest quantifiable, anyway, events that happened to me in my childhood, my entire family is a bunch of physicists. So they're all physics PhDs, physics masters, physics something. And they were very, very aggressive, I might say, in encouraging me to study. So the ethic of learn while you still can was there from the very beginning. And so they pushed me to just explore any form of science that I could get my hands on, physics first and foremost, but math and computer science. And so that was very, very important to me when I was growing up. The other thing that happened twice when my mom was given, so we grew up in a Soviet state, so you didn't really choose your job. The state chose the job for you. And my mom was told one day, you're going to write programs for this computer. And she was handed a computer, and she was kind of like, well, this sounds like an interesting thing to do, but I have no idea. And she actually said, well, why don't you come to work with me? Because this is like another science experiment. I'm going to learn this, and you're going to sit by me and learn with me. And
It worked.
it was amazing. I was like, great. And so I actually helped her write some very, very early programs for work.
When you were how old?
11-ish.
Wow.
Well, something like that. That's actually not that amazing. These days, I know a lot of kids who are like 8 or 9 years old, and they're posting on Twitter about some amazing computers project that they're working on. Like they wrote all the code and did all the hardware themselves. So this was cool 5 years ago or 10 years ago. These days, it's completely par for the course, and it was probably a little too old.
Right.
But the other thing that happened is literally within a couple of weeks of landing in Chicago, which is where my family immigrated to in '91, we literally had $770 to our name. Like the entirety family fortune in liquid assets was less than $800. And I was pretty sure that I was not going to get access to a computer. When I was in Kiev, where I grew up, I actually had access to a state-owned computer that my mom was required to program on. But when we got here, I was computerless, and so I was kind of like, what am I going to do? Like, how am I going to continue doing what I love? And my family scraped together a PC for me. It was a really, really poor quality 286. This is like back in the old age of Intel processors. But within a couple of weeks of getting here, we had like an empty apartment and a computer. And that made a huge difference. Like I was able to continue.
And so 1991, your family comes to America. And you're how old at that point?
16, just turned 16.
Wow. Real quick, your views on, like we're talking about politics, and immigration is a topic near and dear to everybody in this room's heart. Your political views on immigration, where does it stand on a priority list? And
it'd be pretty hard for a relatively successful immigrant to be in anything but extremely pro-immigration. So I'm a firm believer
hence
that...
my question.
I'm a big believer in the melting pot theory that America is great because we continually allow people from every part of the world that are inspired by the American dream to come here and pursue it. So I'm extremely pro that. I think there's an enormous number of complex issues around legalizing immigrants that came here illegally, which is very thorny because some of the stuff, you can see how especially organized labor might have a very big issue with that. And many other more complicated topics like the dreamers, kids that are born here illegally, or kids who came here very, very young age illegally with their parents. So a lot of that stuff probably will take more than 5 minutes to parse out, but just the raw importing intellect and exporting intellectual property is what I think America needs to keep doing to be competitive in the world economy.
Absolutely. So you come here in 1991, and less than 10 years later-ish, you find yourself at the heart of one of the, I think, most important groups of people that have started a company in a long time, the PayPal Mafia, if you will, and you guys have all gone on. You did something very special, and beyond that, the ripples of that specialness have continued. So tell us, from an insider's perspective, what do you think makes the group of folks that started PayPal, you and Reed and Peter and Elon, what made that so special, and what about that DNA has led to such innovation and success?
So I think it's a bit of a trick we pulled on everyone. It's not like we were a bunch of regular guys that got together, drank something special in the water, and everybody became an amazing entrepreneur. We're all entrepreneurial to begin with, and we were kind of aiming for the stars because we didn't know any better, and we'd all primarily failed before, most of us anyway.
Have failed before?
Yeah, so we had very little to lose. Like, I was pretty broke when we started PayPal, and Peter was okay, but he drove a very old car, which got dented by a truck during our first trip to pitch for fundraising. So we're all relatively humble. And so when we sort of got the taste of this amazing sort of crazy success that PayPal ultimately became, we all kind of figured out that this is what we want to do. We want to keep going and aim higher and shoot bigger. The the reason there's such a high concentration of entrepreneurs, both successful and unsuccessful, for every successful PayPal mafioso, there's a half dozen that are on their fifth or sixth company that has failed, and which is, it's not great, but that's just how it works.
Yeah.
You have a pretty bad success to failure ratio, but successes are, worth a lot. So the reason so many people out of PayPal, early PayPal anyway, wound up starting more and more companies is not only because we saw on our own example that this could be really big and really amazing, it's also we selected from more people like us. We basically said, look, we want kids, because we're all kind of kids at the time, that have nothing to lose, that are just going to go big or go home every time, and that basically all think that this is their final training ground. Their next company is going to be their own. And that's exactly what happened. That's where YouTube came from that, and LinkedIn came from that, and many, Elon's crazy ventures all came from that.
But the filter of saying I want people who are not afraid of failure and who absolutely are of the belief that after this they're going to start their own thing, that's phenomenal. It makes a lot of sense. And let's take the example of Yelp. I want to get a lot in a short period of time, but so Yelp, you're the chairman and Jeremy's running it. Jeremy used to work for you at PayPal. Really quick, how did that come together, and how's that relationship working?
So it's very easy to remember. So I started something a little bit like Lightbank. I'm doing now the second version of that, but before, about 10 years ago, I began another kind of an innovation lab where we would brainstorm, come up with ideas, prototype, scrap, rinse, repeat. So we were working in that group, and Jeremy was taking a break from during the summer between first and second year of Harvard Business School, which he never finished as a result of starting Yelp. And this was my 29th birthday party, and he and another guy named Russ Simmons, not to be confused, was the famous...
Russell.
Well, his name is Russell, but
Okay.
he's another brilliant kid from Chicago. So all three of us are University of Illinois graduates, and Jeremy's from the East Coast, but Russ and I are both Chicago natives, more or less for me, but he was actually born here. So at my 29th birthday party, Russ and Jeremy were sitting in the back of the table at slanted door in a ferry building in San Francisco, and while we were eating noodles, I can see their heads were slowly getting bigger and bigger, and at the end of the lunch, they came up to me and they said, dude, I think we figured out what's going to happen to Yellow Pages. It's going to be amazing. They're like, all right, tell me, and they did, and I am normally one of the more deliberate, kind of ridiculously overanalyzing, hopefully thoughtful, but at least obsessive investors. And I knew those guys so well because they worked for me for 4 years. It was like, wow, this is like, I don't know if the idea is awesome, but the combination of huge market, pretty big idea, right or wrong, and these two guys is like a guarantee. Nothing could possibly come out of this that will not be enormous. So I basically wrote him $1 million check on the spot. And it was literally single best investment I've ever made in my life so far.
And
Have to
I hope
keep
for
trying.
you, I hope you're right. So that to me is the ecosystem you're talking about, is having experience with people on the front lines and then staying in the game so that when they're ready for the next thing, you're there, and it's that's example of no friction, right?
It's the frictionless, like someone who has taken a bet, who's more to the point. When I was writing this check, I remember the conversation we had with our first backers, back then called Nokia Ventures, these days called Blue Run Ventures. They renamed themselves, but same people. So this is the first people that actually took a chance on PayPal. And PayPal had a very hard time raising money. We literally pitched what seemed like 100 venture capitalists, maybe fewer, but this was not like oh wow, these guys are going to go kill it, because we were completely unknown quantity. So John and Pete, the two guys from Nokia Ventures, basically took a chance on us. And we showed up to our first post-funding dinner to celebrate, and sheepishly told them, by the way, we have this crazy idea, we're going to give everybody $10 to sign up. And they just invested like $4 million. So they're like, that's going to go real fast. And I was terrified, because I was still like 24 years old, and Peter was 28, I think, and kind of like, yeah, we thought about it, we're just going to give it all away. And took a big breath, and John looked at Pete and said, all right, well, let's have dinner, and let's grow, let's spend some money, let's see what happens. And like, wow, Silicon Valley is amazing. Well, because we had a plan. It's not like I was scared we're going to lose the money and not build a company. I was scared that the guys who wrote us a check would say, wait a second, that's not how it's supposed to work. You're supposed to be very careful.
Right.
And they're like, do not be careful. Go kick some ass.
That's a great story. So, and talk about, I'm not sure we all in this room knew or know that it was 100 meetings to raise money for PayPal, right? I mean, the act of fundraising for a technology startup founder is fill in the blank.
It's pretty challenging if you're doing it the first time, and it's an art form, and a good CEO basically does three things: sets the vision, or at least keeps the vision true, hires an amazing team to build the vision, and raises money. Like, those are the only three jobs for a startup CEO. Everything else needs to be delegated, or at least you should be able to delegate it. And fundraising is tough. Sometimes.
And it's a litmus test. I mean, that's your job, is to be able to articulate things well enough to.
Yeah.
And it's not easy. 100 meetings, you guys kept going.
It's grueling. I remember, so Silicon Valley kind of works like this. Like, Sand Hill Road is where the tier A, and then so 3000 Sand Hill Road is the address of Sequoia Capital, Menlo Ventures, like all these really big guys. Across the street, 2991 or whatever is Andreessen Horowitz. Like, those are the outposts right over 280. And then as you go down the hill, it's like sort of a lesser and lesser guys, less popular, less well known. There's some standouts, but it's generally like the lower you go. And then you get to like the Palo Alto downtown, and then their outskirts, and then their outskirts, and there's like an hour-long drive to Saratoga. And I remember driving back from the Red Brick Venture Partners in Saratoga, California, who listened to Peter and me talk about what was going to be PayPal, and basically tell us, no one's ever going to give you a penny for this idea. This is the dumbest thing we've ever heard. Go home. And I'm like, wow, fundraising is really hard. And Peter's like, yeah, we have like 4 more meetings today, so man up. So, and we just manned up a lot for a long time.
One of the many things that I find impressive about you is that you're still going. You're creating aggressively. So, limited time. Give us the elevator pitch for Affirm real quick.
So, credit issuance for consumers and small businesses has basically remained the same for the last 35, 40 years. And it's based on this thing called the FICO score, which banks invented a long time ago. And it doesn't take into account who you really are and what you really do, because it used to be really, really hard to determine that. And things have changed. Today, you're completely open on the internet. There's many, 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 many informational footprints of who you are. We believe that granting credit should be done based on who you are in social media, what you are on Twitter, who you are on Facebook. So we decided to go and uproot the entire old school credit granting system, which could be very expensive if we're wrong. If we can't figure out if you're good for the money, we'll eat our hats. But I think we're pretty good at figuring out risk. So it's a financial scoring and credit granting company, essentially a new kind of a bank.
And you can check out of a shopping cart with.
So the very first product that we've built was just the first kind of a invitation to new kind of a credit, is what's known as a spot loan. If you're checking out of an online shop or even a physical world shop, instead of pulling out your credit card, which on a mobile phone it's a lot of work, 2 hands, thumbs, what we do is we basically say, if you give us your phone number, we can look up the rest. If we believe that you're good for the money, we'll let you put it on a digital tab that we will guarantee to the merchant.
Fascinating. We could go on for a half hour or hour and more. But I want to thank you for making the trip to Chicago, congratulate you for the award, and thank you for joining us on the Chicago Ideas Week stage.
Pleasure. Thank you.